I will go ahead, even though we're just a few minutes early, I will go ahead and introduce Josh Smith and Robert Janezic. Now, you may know Josh as Love Y'all on Twitter or Data Jackalope, and Robert went with the very classic name for his Twitter handle. So we have their handles here. Please use those to shout them out on social. And so today they're talking about a tale of two Vizzies, storytelling, mentorship, and friendship in the Datafam. Now, when I thought about what to talk about with Josh, he is somebody who has a background in the humanities, really just an amazing human, I think. And really is very thoughtful in his approach to data visualization and the Tableau community. So Joshua is here, and really he has won some of Vizzies before, especially in the storytelling aspect, and really just a solid member of the Tableau community. Robert is a data visualization strategist and has created just amazing visualizations that kind of blow my mind, just in terms of how beautiful and what a great emotive storytelling that he has. So I'm very excited to introduce both of these gentlemen today. So Josh and Robert, if you are ready, we will, I'll kick it over to you.
Hello, let me share my screen. Thanks for that introduction, Emily. Yes, share my screen. Make this bigger. Okay, welcome everyone to the Tableau Fringe Festival. You're in for 2 days of really, fantastic speakers and some great presentations. And today, Josh and I are going to be talking about A Tale of Two Vizzies, storytelling, mentorship, and friendship in the Datafam. Now, before we kind of get into the meat of things, I kind of want to talk about the structure of this presentation. So the structure of this presentation is going to be a timeline format. So let's kind of go over the legend so everyone's kind of on the same page about things. So at the top here, you have my timeline, which is Robert. The bottom line is Josh. We have before we started working together, while we were working together at the same company, and then after we kind of went our separate ways professionally. The two timelines start when Josh decided that he needed to look for a new hire at his company that he was at, and the end of the timeline is this actual presentation. So the blue dots represent a significant event for Josh or I, and two connecting blue dots represent the same type of event, just from different perspectives. So now that we kind of, have the legend out of the way, let's kick it over to Josh, and he's going to go over his first significant event.
Almost forgot to unmute myself. What a fun way to start this off. And I will preface this by saying there's a 2-year-old and a dog in this household. So I'm a little bit out of breath. That's because I was just chasing them both down like literally 90 seconds before this kicked off. So I'm glad I made it back in time. At this time where we're at in the timeline, I worked at a company called Midwest Health Collaborative. And my bandwidth was just getting more and more eaten up as we had 5 major health systems that were our stakeholders, and we were kicking off our own internal design for data products and starting custom engagements with some of our clients. And it was getting to a spot where I was looking at how do I design and build 10 dashboards all at the same time, all with different requirements? How do I keep track of these engagements? And finally convinced my boss that if you want quality work, we have to hire someone else that can design. And Rob, I don't know if it was just I found you in the community. I think you applied, and that got my attention toward it. Not quite sure what happened there, but I ended up seeing your profile. And I looked over Rob's work, and this was his early work. This was in 2018. And I was like, we have got to get this person in for an interview. So I call up Rob, and he walks in, and I realize immediately that he is super tall. And his pants were just a little bit of high waters. It's an adorable feature of Rob. It's so endearing. I love it. He shows up and, in my perspective, just I think really did a phenomenal job. And I'm going to pitch it back to Rob to talk about that experience and kind of the next moments in this timeline.
So it's funny that you actually mentioned, asked the question of how we met. And I was actually going to tell that story right now. So I was working at this point in the timeline, I was working in Cleveland, Ohio, and I wanted to move to Columbus, Ohio. So naturally you start, looking for positions. And by the way, this is going to be a good plug for Tableau user groups. So I said, maybe I could just try and join the Columbus Tableau user group before I even moved there. So I messaged Bridget Cogley on Twitter and I asked, how do I become a part of the Columbus Tableau user group? She gave me the information. I joined the Slack and I noticed there was this guy on the Slack that kept posting his work on there. And, there wasn't a ton of people posting their work, but I noticed one consistent person and it was Josh. So I said, okay, cool. It's pretty, it's cool that this guy is posting all of his work. So I went to his profile. I saw where he works at and I went to their website, and very conveniently, there was a data visualization designer role. So I said, okay, that's perfect. Let me apply. And I think the next day or the day after, Josh messaged me back. So that's a good plug for Tableau user groups. If, you never know where your next position is going to come from. And, Tableau user groups are a great way to interact with other people in the community. So let's talk about the phone interview with Josh. So naturally going into phone interviews, you can be slightly nervous. And then perhaps once you get in the groove, you're pretty good. But almost instantly, I was nervous at first, but once I started talking to Josh, I instantly became not nervous. Because I don't know if you've talked to Josh. He's a super easy guy to talk with. He's always paying attention to the words you're saying. He's really considerate about what you're saying. He makes sure that, he doesn't talk over you. So, he's really considerate with your time and the things that you're saying. And so one thing that I could tell was that it's hard to articulate how I could tell that Josh was different. But at that point in time, I was super technical. All I knew was Tableau tech, calculations, LODs, all of the, tech side of Tableau. I didn't understand any of this other stuff. So in the interview, whenever I would kind of stray away from my bread and butter of technical, I could kind of tell he would wrap me, bring me back to perhaps change, what I'm saying, because I didn't really know what I was saying at the time. It was kind of just saying it because it's an interview and I didn't know exactly what to say. And that's kind of the moment that I could tell that I was going to learn a ton from this guy. So that's kind of where that ends, and then jumps into Josh's next event.
Yeah, so with Rob being a new hire to the organization, have to assess what does he know, what does he not know, and Rob just mentioned that tech was his bread and butter, and I think that's a fair-ish assessment, but Rob, your designs were phenomenal, and working with Rob, I was able to assess a couple of things. One, he didn't come from the healthcare industry, and healthcare is complicated in its own ways, just like other industries are. And so there was a lot to learn about healthcare economics and the kind of roles we fit in there from a data viz perspective. But I also came to realize that, Rob's incredible design skills were the result of intuition. And I wanted to help provide him with a framework to talk about that intuition, to discuss with our clients why he was making the choices he made. Sometimes clients want to push back, and helping them understand why you're making certain choices and helping them navigate the design process can be the difference between a successful engagement and an unsuccessful engagement, or worse, an engagement that you think ended successfully, and then months down the road, or even a year down the road, you get a call back from the client and they say, our users are terrible. Our users are so frustrated, right? I wanted to help Rob develop that framework to talk about why his gut made the calls that it did. And so that was assessing where we needed to go. And then the question was, how do I help Robbie navigate this space?
So, just taking into consideration everything Josh just said, once we started one-on-ones, and to add some context, I didn't even know what a one-on-one was before I started working with Josh. That's not something we did before. I didn't understand the concept. I picked up on it pretty quickly, obviously, but I got this overwhelming feeling once I started doing the one-on-ones with Josh that I got this feeling of I don't know anything. And before that point, I thought I knew everything because I thought all you needed to know was tech. All you needed to know was the in-depth stuff. But I learned that there's so many other subject areas to learn. And, like I mentioned before, if you talk to Josh, he's extremely knowledgeable in, these specific, in these areas, and there's a lot of different areas that he's knowledgeable in. And I remember sitting there and just kind of watching him kind of go off on his, in-depth analysis and all of these different subject areas. And I would be sitting there, and this is kind of what Josh looked like at times. And it's not because he was smoking a cigarette or that he was talking about Pepe Sylvia, which is my favorite show of all time. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And it's not that not the fact that he was, all over the place and he wasn't organized. It's just the sheer amount of things that Josh was teaching me. It felt overwhelming at times. And to clarify, not overwhelming in terms of it wasn't organized in a great way. It's just the amount of information being thrown at me was pretty overwhelming at times. And I did get this sensation that I wasn't going to be able to learn these things. Like, it just felt like too much at the time. And I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to talk about how I got over that later. So I'm going to pass it back over to Josh.
Yeah. And Rob, in-depth analysis is a really kind way to describe my tangential anecdotes.
I wanted to keep it nice, Josh.
Yeah, often can lead to a little bit of disorganization. But as I saw Rob start to latch onto some of this information, because like I mentioned, healthcare economics can be really, really complicated. And then you get into the nuances of that. And then we're supposed to design through that and kind of coach design. And, I'm a really big believer in that we all have really unique skill sets, right? Like, my background in the humanities and folkloristics and creative writing, and even growing up in an agricultural area, have all been unique assets that have differentiated me. And so as Rob started to gain his footing on some of the need to know concepts to be successful in his role, I started to transition my attention toward, okay, now he's different than everyone else here. He has unique skills than everyone else here. How do we nurture those? How do we encourage those, right? I don't want to teach Rob to be me and then have two me's in the organization. I want to teach Rob to be himself and the best he that he can be. And consequently, enable him to bring the unique value to our organization and just watch him grow and flourish. So that's the kind of attention shift that I had. We have these basic skills. I can see unique attributes in Rob. How do we start to encourage those and get that growth?
So Josh was talking about how do I encourage his unique skills. And I remember there was a one-on-one we had where he proposed the question of what makes me different. I suppose it's not something I thought of before. I was kind of just making visualizations and posting them to Tableau Public, it didn't really dawn on me at all. And that's a quick plug of why mentors are amazing. They help you ask questions and see things that you perhaps couldn't see before. So he asked me this question of what makes me different. I hadn't thought about it before. I kind of sat with it for a little bit, and we kind of came to the consensus that, music was my thing. I don't know if, people in this chat know my visualizations. Most of it has to do with music. It's just something I'm into, new albums, new artists, new tracks, whatever it is. So, music was one of my things. And then the other thing that took a little bit longer to figure out was what was my style. And I was kind of walking around my apartment, and I noticed that my apartment's always clean and organized, and it has a generally pretty minimalist style. So I said, well, it just makes sense that the way I'm organizing my apartment is exactly the same way that I would organize my visualizations. So most of the things that I visualize are music, and most of the time it's minimalist and clean. And I want to be very clear that Josh proposed this question to me, that what makes me different, but someone doesn't always need a thing. If you decide that your thing is to not have a thing, that's completely awesome. Like if you want to visualize every topic, you want to do every style, that's great. And that's your thing. So I just want to make it clear that not everyone needs a thing, but I decided that for me specifically, I did want that thing that kind of helped me, stand out from the thousands and thousands of, Tableau Public, publishers. So jump back over to Josh.
If you're doing your job as a mentor to anyone out there mentoring, it should be an incredibly humbling experience. The person you're mentoring should grow faster than you did, because you're helping them with the lessons you learned, the hard knocks that you encountered. And consequently, they don't necessarily need to make the same mistakes you made. They don't need to run into the same hard knocks, right? You're just like science, right? We don't need scientists to rediscover. Every scientist doesn't need to rediscover all the laws and theories out there. They learn from other scientists. And so every scientist is more capable than the generation that came before them. It just builds on each other. And as a mentor, you're part of a similar process in teaching and handing down, which means you're going to watch your mentee accelerate your path. And if you're doing your job right, you're going to have this humbling moment like I did, like I have with everyone I've ever mentored, where you stop, you're like, holy shit. Sorry if that's an inappropriate term during a presentation, but holy shit, this kid is talented. What I started to discover, right? I'm okay at design implementation. I tend to be really good at design strategy, talking with clients, figuring out how to design something that's going to fit their organizational brand, that's going to fit their users. But when it comes to choosing your actual palettes and your fonts and the lines and whatnot, like you can clearly see this PowerPoint design was 100% Rob's implementation. We came up with the strategy together. I started to realize that Rob's picking up on design strategy faster than I ever did. And he's pairing it with stronger implementation skills than I ever had. And it's this humbling experience. But I also encourage mentors to take joy in that, right? To take joy in being a part of helping someone grow that much. Taking joy, and just like scientists take joy in the fact that the next generation is going to build on their work and take it even further. As a mentor, right, taking so much joy in that you are participating in the act of accelerating the growth of the next generation, knowing that they're going to do the same thing when they turn around and mentor people. It's humbling, but it is such a joyful and rewarding experience.
Quick thing, if you hear beeping in the background, that just means people are redoing the roof on my apartment complex, so apologies there. So let's jump to me knowing some more stuff. So as you can tell by the placement of these dots, it took, I'd say it was 5 to 6 to 7 months where I actually felt more comfortable that I could say that I knew more stuff. And this stuff encompasses design strategy, design theories, color theory, UI, UX, cognitive biases, all of these different things that before I met Josh, I didn't even know it was a thing in the world. And it took a while to get there, but there was one very specific thing that I would always push back on Josh. I would say, Josh, I can design these things. Why do I need to talk about it? And I pushed back on that a lot. I remember conversations I had where I was like, I can do it. Why do I need to talk about it? And it kind of clicked eventually. And once I came to that realization that it's just as important for a few reasons. One, if you're talking with a client or a user, being able to articulate the decisions you made, it helps them buy into what you're presenting them. And that's a really important piece of the BI process in general. So once I realized being able to articulate your design is just as important as actually designing it, that's kind of when I told myself, you know what, Rob, maybe you do know some more stuff and perhaps you can be a little bit more comfortable and confident in the things that Josh is presenting you. And now you can actually go out and talk to other people about these things instead of just me sitting in a room and Josh just explaining these things to me. So it was a big confidence booster for me to come to that realization. And this is pretty, cliche to say, but it just takes time. If you're dedicated and you're putting in the work to learn these things, you're gonna learn it. It just comes with hard work, dedication, and time. And, like I just mentioned, it's pretty cliche, but, it's kind of how it goes. So let me pass it back over to Josh.
Yeah, so we come up to a spot where the Iron Viz was happening, the qualifiers rather, and I decided that agriculture, having grown up in farmland, was just too much of a topic I cared about to pass up. So, Rob, if you go to the next slide, we're going to show a before, during, and after. What I want to call out here is how much influence from Rob lives in this visualization. It's everywhere. I looked through this design and I looked through my previous designs and I was like, there's very clearly a Rob effect, right? As much as I was mentoring Rob circumstantially because I was his boss at the time, I was also being mentored. And that's something we're going to talk about, is that mentoring is also an act of learning from your mentee. And there's a very, very wavy, semi-transparent line between who's the mentor and who's the mentee in any good relationship there. And you can see my own growth that came out of working with Rob. I just learned from his incredible gut instinct on what makes a good design. So this was just a byproduct. Rob was here, Rob provided some feedback. I was able to talk over ideas in addition to, talking with the farmers and whatnot that went into this viz. Rob was a big help here, and just such a source of inspiration. And the fact that I won this qualifier, I don't think that would have happened if I hadn't met and learned from Rob.
Yeah, I very vividly remember you winning this because I was at my desk and Josh always had this spot in the corner, and I remember I saw the results and I'm like, Josh, I told you, and I went over there and gave him a big high five because I knew he was gonna win. He was just so into agriculture and all of that, and he put a ton of work into it. Music memories. So this is probably one of my favorite visualizations ever for a few reasons, and for some context, this is coming off of Josh winning the first feeder, and this was the second feeder, and the second feeder was music. So obviously I have to participate in that, and not to put pressure on myself, but I remember Kevin Flairledge tweeting me and he said, "You're up," or something like that. And I said, okay, great, Kevin, no pressure there at all. So I was like, all right, I really have to create something really interesting. And, Josh was always talking to me about, data storytelling and everything like that. So I said, I want to put a big emphasis on that. So I thought, my mom would always tell me stories about concerts that she went to, albums she went to. I thought it'd be interesting if each quote and story that she gave me was an actual data point through time. And I thought, that's a cool idea. Let me go to Josh with that idea and see what he thinks. So I went to Josh with it. He's like, love it, love the idea. But he gave me one little piece of feedback that kind of changed the trajectory of the design and overall project. He said, what if you made it so when you click on a dot, one of the quotes and stories shows? And I said, that's a perfect way to create a very linear, story through time of, you click this, a story shows, you click this, and then the story shows, and you're actually letting the user go through time. And so I said, okay, I don't know how to do that technically, but I'll figure it out. And like Josh has mentioned, the combination of some of my technical stuff and Josh's ability to see the overall strategy, it's a pretty good pairing with being able to create something that's, really unique and interesting. And, that idea, I think, that he proposed was just fantastic. And it's a great, great thing that promotes mentorship, because you have someone to go to that will give you critiques that perhaps you wouldn't have seen before, and give you ideas that you wouldn't have seen before. So, having a mentor is fantastic for that, feedback type stuff.
So, at this point, it says it's separated professionally, but not, but our relationship continued, right? So I left the organization where we both worked. But, I've left a lot of organizations where, I was in a mentorship role just as a manager. Mentorship is a part of any good manager role. And so I've left before, and I've always made sure that people had my phone number and contact information in case they needed to reach out to me. Rob was someone that did. I also want to note that during some of the transition here, and especially, thinking about that Music Memories Viz, working together day to day and being in a mentor-mentee relationship, we got to witness life moments. And that's where, the line between a mentorship and a menteeship and just a friendship starts to blur, right? Rob, I was working with Rob, and we had this relationship during the birth of my first and only right now child. And then he releases Music Memories and had that line in there about his mom dancing with him as a baby to a certain song, because it's the only song that Robbie as a baby could fall asleep to. And like, that Viz literally brought tears to my eyes, because I was living that exact moment. My son had like terrible colic, and so we would play Over the Rainbow, and that was like the only thing that would calm him down. And so I was living the moments in that Viz. And, Rob and I got to share that, and it was really impactful and really powerful. This turned into something beyond just a mentorship. And I think a lot of good mentorships do, is they evolve outside of that normal role into just a friendship. Sorry, my view box of all our videos was hiding the next dot here. I'm actually just going to forward it to Robbie and then pick up afterwards, because you need to see Robbie's dot here.
Yeah, let me just jump to the next one. So, I won 2 awards at the Vizzies this year. I won Viz of the Year, and I won Data Storyteller Extraordinaire. And at the time, I wasn't even on the Zoom. I was at a wedding rehearsal for my sister, and I got texts from a few people, and I don't even think Josh knew I won the. I don't think Josh knew that I won Viz of the Year. I think he was so fixated on the data storyteller extraordinaire, because he won it previous year. The idea that the mentor would win it one year and then the mentee would win it the next year is really interesting. And it kind of just shows the ability of Josh to be able to teach things to people and them be able, and their ability to apply it. So I was at the wedding rehearsal and I got this text from Josh, and it kind of hit me. It was the idea, let me just read it out first. It says, "I've never been more proud of an award, including the ones I've earned. I love it." The idea that someone is just as excited for something that you win as compared to yourself is a really powerful thing. And it kind of shows you what a mentor-mentee relationship can be. And I hope that whoever is going to be a mentor or mentee, sees the power that it can have, and that, it's something that they really want to engage in. So I'm going to jump back to Josh and, get his feeling on it, because when I got that text, I thought it was super cool.
Yeah, Rob, when I saw Rob win that award, I was cooking dinner and rallying a 2-year-old and a dog, and life was a little bit chaotic, and I wasn't even quite in the room, and I heard data storytelling and Rob, and like just literally jumped for joy. And if you were at the Tableau conference in 2019, I got the award and I teared up a little bit. It was very, very meaningful from the community. It really hit a spot where I was kind of questioning some self-esteem things on my capabilities, based on a terrible previous boss of mine. And, it was meaningful. But when Rob won, I literally jumped. I hugged my kid because Robbie wasn't there for me to hug. I high-fived my wife. I was just so excited for that. And, I can't express to other people looking for mentors out there, when you see things like this happen, that's where that reward I talked about before really kicks in. That's where it all connects. And that's where you see the difference that you are making, but you also just see the joy of the person you're working with grow. And there's nothing that can capture that.
And here's kind of the finished up timeline of, significant events, through Josh and I's relationship over time. And now let's kind of look at what a before, during, and after would look like for some visualizations.
Yeah. So before I met Rob, you see this one on the left. It was okay. I liked the work. In fact, I used this viz recently when I had somebody taking paternity leave and we were trying to do some project estimation. When's the baby going to arrive? Probabilistically speaking. But then you see during, right? And you see this shift. As a mentor, I'm learning from teaching Rob, and I'm starting to articulate my own ideas a little bit better, but also learning some of Rob's stuff. And then you look at some of the recent work I've done with forests, and you see that shift toward the clean minimalism that Rob talked about, right? I'm picking up on some of those things that he's teaching me, in addition to learning how to articulate my own points even a little bit better. So that growth is easily demonstrated in my Tableau public profile.
In my work, I would almost say the exact same thing. Before it's, high contrast colors, and what you can actually see during. I think this is after we had the conversation of, what's my thing. So I started to create a lot more music visualizations, and the during, it has the music, but I still haven't gotten my, design aesthetic down yet. But you can see very clearly after I tried to combine all of those things together: music, clean, minimalism. And like Josh said, almost all of my visualizations now are all of those things. And it's just what I love doing. So.
So, for some parting thoughts, if you see me looking off to the side here, I've got like a nice little sticky note here worth of parting thoughts. But if you're thinking about mentoring because you say, I'm a talented, well-recognized individual and others would appreciate my help, I want you to encourage to reframe that. Mentorship isn't some volunteer work in which you're helping other people. It's not an unrequited gift. Mentoring is crucial for your own personal growth. It helps you see where your own talents and where your own skills are differentiated. I learned about me by mentoring Rob. It helps you articulate your perspective and develop and refine your own voice and reinforce what you've learned through teaching. Did I help Rob? I mean, he's told me I have, but he also helped me just as much. This isn't an unrequited gift. This isn't some, savior sacrifice I did. I got a lot out of this. And that's going to be true of anyone that's really investing in a mentorship relationship. It also is going to keep you humble. I've mentioned that a few times, but you're going to have to reconcile the fact that people are growing faster than you did. And you're going to find people that are more talented and they're learning from you and applying those their existing talents. But that humbling impact is something you should take joy in. So I encourage everyone to look at how they can be a mentor, but don't look at it from the perspective of, I'm talented so I can help other people and this is volunteer work. Look at it from the perspective of, this is a relationship and we're going to be helping each other and growing. I happen to have a little bit more experience in this, so we're calling me a mentor, but looking back and in reflection, the fact that I was Rob's mentor was only in part because I had a little bit more experience and because I was his boss. Outside of that, 100% the other way around, I was mentored by him as well.
So if I'm going to be 100% honest, if I was not at a company that promoted the idea of mentor-mentee relationship, I don't know if I would have ever dipped my toe in the water. And that's simply for the fact that it's not really something that I even thought of before. I didn't understand the idea of building this relationship with someone and being able to learn things, from that person. That being said, it's completely changed the direction of my career. And I'm 100% going to be all in on promoting the idea of the mentor-mentee relationship. And, I know there's a lot of people out there that are potentially thinking they want to be a mentor or mentee, but they're a bit afraid to, dip their toe in the water. I would say that do it, and the water is not that cold. I promise you it's not that bad. It's awesome. You're going to build an awesome relationship. You're going to have someone that you can go to for any questions, whether it be life, professional, technical stuff, design stuff perhaps. And, I want to do a quick plug. There's a website called Mentoring Meetup. Mark Bradburn started that. So if you feel like, perhaps the mentor-mentee thing is for you, I would check that out. And also I would promote, perhaps just messaging people that, really inspire you, people that you look up to, and perhaps they'll say something along the lines of, yeah, I will, I'll be your mentor, or, that would be great. And just be aware that people are really busy. So keep that in mind, but you never know unless you take that first step to asking someone. So if you look up to someone, maybe just ask. And that's kind of the end of it. And here's our Twitter handles, and that's my website if you're interested in some of the blogs that I've been creating and some of the work that I've been doing. Are there any questions here? Let's see.
Yep, we've got a couple in the Q&A chat, or the Q&A box. To Josh, as a mentor, how do you take back critique from your mentee?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Everyone handles their mentor-mentee relationship differently. I will say that personally, I tend to lean into a much more casual relational approach where I can, right? And so Robbie and I had the advantage of working together, being in person all the time, and I see there's going to be another question about that specifically. But so that meant it was a lot more of a back and forth. And one of Rob's best qualities is he doesn't hesitate to push back. You heard that mentioned a couple of times. And so as a mentor, I had to be light on my feet and I had to adjust my mentorship style. So, there's not really a formal process of providing feedback. That feedback happened naturally during conversation as I'm talking to Rob, and I'm like, okay, well, this isn't jiving with him and this isn't a way that he's wanting to learn. Let me work with him from a different angle. Let's figure out how we can come to a similar perspective. Not that, he 100% had to shape his perspective to match mine, but, figuring out where we meet up together and where that common path is that we walk together. How do we navigate through the forest? Hand in hand sounds a little bit cheesy, but hand in hand as our journeys are intertwined. How do we get there? And that happens through conversation with Rob pushing back, etc. Some organizations have specific kinds of surveys that they'll give to managers or mentors, or rather to the people they manage or the people they mentor, to get that structured feedback. So that's a question that I would toss back to: how do you prefer to receive the critique? If it happens conversationally, that works. If you would rather have something formalized and something you can analyze, then I would encourage something like a survey. I've seen a lot of organizations do that, and it's pretty effective.
And I can kind of give my opinion from a mentee's perspective. Like Josh mentioned, I am not afraid to give my opinion or push back on things. I always question constraints, always. If something has been done one way for a long time, I always question whether or not that's the best way to do it. Perhaps things can be improved, but I think from the mentee's perspective, don't be afraid to push back on certain situations. I think the ability to have a back and forth is an extremely natural way to communicate. It's less formal, it's less business-like, but it's very, I would call it human-like, where people are just talking back and forth and giving their opinions on things. And I think that's why the relationship that Josh and had, it felt so natural in a way that it was just like two people having a conversation. And, when I push back, Josh would have his rebuttal, and then I would give my rebuttal, and then it would go on for that for a while. But, Josh gave his opinion, gave mine from the mentee perspective. So.
Awesome. And then we have another question. When you don't have the working relationship to begin, how do you recommend building a mentorship relationship like this?
Yeah, the key point of that question is going to be like this. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think you can. That doesn't mean you can't develop really good mentor-mentee relationships that have the relationship as a key aspect. And other ones that I've done where it didn't start with a working relationship and we didn't spend 40 hours a week together. Face-to-face calls were really important. And as a mentor, I really believe that first few sessions should be all about asking questions. I don't think mentors should out the gate provide recommendations. I think it's really about listening. So you can make sure, just like the design thinking approach, right? Make sure that you're structuring the solution to fit. Some of the digital mentor-mentee relationships I've had, we've had video calls to talk through things, lots and lots and lots of questions to get to know the person better, sharing stories, sharing what makes a person unique, and then really trying to open those channels for communication, right? So big fan of Slack. And so I would try to find a spot or a workspace on Slack where the people and I could connect. And so we had a little bit more of a natural back and forth. And of course, we may be in meetings and unable to respond, but generally speaking, that back and forth happens a lot quicker. And so conversation starts to become a little bit more fluid. Those relationships didn't feel like the one that Rob and I have, and I want to be transparent there, but those other relationships are good and they're strong and they're powerful, and we celebrate each other's lives, and good things come of that. So it would be different, but I think there's a level of strength that comes with the digital format too, as long as that communication and the getting to know the other person is there.
Awesome. Okay, and then one last question to Robert and Josh. Are you also part of mentor-mentee program, and how do you handle your mentees? I think maybe that's the mentoring meetup.
Yeah, so, I am not yet a part of that. but it's something that I have been thinking more about. And what's interesting, coming from someone that's a bit younger, I do feel like a fraud at times if I'm offering to be a mentor, but I know that's not necessarily the best way to look at it. But being young and the idea of being a mentor is, it's harder for me to wrap my head around. But I've lately been getting away from that viewpoint, and I think that I do have, good qualities, and I have good information that I could provide people. So I think that, just because you're young, this is specifically talking to younger people, just because you're young doesn't mean you can't provide insightful information to people that perhaps need it. So I would say, just go for it, no matter your age, the matter of technical skills you have. I would say just go for it, because you can always, give helpful, insightful information to people. And maybe, you don't even, you didn't even know that you could provide it, but once you get that relationship, then, you can start giving that.
For me, yes, I have been, and I've met a couple of people through there. Right now, you actually pinged or made me think that I probably need to reach out and make sure that I'm listed as such on the website. Right now, I need to pull back from that. Right, the pandemic and being high risk means we can't get childcare, which means my days usually run 6 a.m. to 8:30, 9 p.m. of either full-time work or taking care of the kid, and so I don't have the time that a mentee deserves. And I encourage all of you to reflect on that. Do you have the time to support an additional person this way? And if you don't, you're not going to see that relationship evolve. Time is a critical aspect that has to be given from both the mentor and the mentee.
And I do have one quick thing to that. So to add some context, before we started working, the most time that Josh and I spent together was while we worked together. Naturally, as you separate professionally, it just makes sense that you're literally going to see them less, you're going to communicate less. But since we worked together for a good amount of time, the relationship was there. And I feel like I can go, months and months without talking to Josh, and whenever I text him or call him, it would feel exactly the same as before. So time is a big thing, like Josh mentioned. So.
All right. Well, we don't have any other open questions. I want to thank you both for your time today. This was an amazing, first of all, an amazing way to kick off TFF, but also just a really beautiful presentation and talk around what that mentorship storytelling, I loved all of it. I took so many notes in terms of some of my takeaways. And I love, Josh, what you said around mentoring is crucial for your own growth. I think if we think about it in that hierarchical sense, we lose something as a mentor. And I love to see how that relationship and how the influence that you each had on each other really has been demonstrated through your work. So that's amazing. Again, I appreciate your time, both you and Robert's time so much this morning. It was such a wonderful way to kick off the conference. And of course, for all of our attendees, make sure, if you haven't already, please follow Robert and Josh on Twitter, and then provide your shout outs. Let them know what your biggest takeaways are, so that way they can see the impact of their contribution through TFF. All right, Josh and Robert, thank you so much. That's such a great presentation. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily.
Love y'all.
Bye.
All right. And